Ben Fagan here with another episode of Career Cash, the podcast. And on this episode, I sit down with Alumni Relations Coordinator at Lifeskills South Florida, Dani Lozzi. On the episode, Dani and I talk about transitioning into her first job after college, why it's important to acknowledge all of your thoughts and feelings, and how you can maximize your experiences. It's an awesome conversation. Let's get to it. I mean, what a special episode this is. We are sitting down. I've got the great privilege to sit down with the one and the only Dani Lozzi. Dani, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Finally, I've been waiting for this moment for a while.
It's a long time coming, just knocking down the door, trying to get on, but in due time, because you've been working on a lot of cool things lately. And I think that is the perfect place to start. So why don't you catch us up on the latest and greatest, where you're at, and what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Okay, so I currently work as the Alumni Relations Coordinator at Lifeskills South Florida, which is a mental health facility. So that's what I do as my day-to-day. What that means, because I have the same title that I did at Lynn, right? But it's completely different in the mental health space. So I really take care of our clients as they transition from being a client into being an alumnus, discharging from our program, and really helping them with that aftercare and staying on their path to recovery, and creating that community and that support where they can really just be themselves and talk openly and share with each other and know that, there's no judgment. And, that's pretty much my job. And I get to combine what I'm good at with what I enjoy doing. So it's really the best of both worlds.
That's awesome, and that's what I love. And we're going to dive a lot more into, that kind of space, the mental health space. Because I know that's your tea right there. That's what
My bread and butter.
your bread and butter. I knew I was naming the wrong food group. It's not tea, it's bread and butter. Yeah,
Yeah,
make a
that's
note of
right.
that. But right. So we're gonna dive into that in a second. But I think what's cool and what I want to touch on here is your educational background and kind of this journey, because you're coming from a psych background, get your master's in communication. Now you're working in alumni relations and mental health, right? And so obviously there's some correlation throughout, but can you kind of tie like the loose ends together for us in terms of how your journey has kind of unfolded, and then how you feel you've benefited from each stage?
It's funny because to me, it makes perfect sense, kind of like the roadmap that I've taken. But from the outside looking in, it's kind of, how does that all tie together? So my bachelor's is in psychology. I then did communication and media studies for my master's. And what's funny is that wasn't the original plan. I wasn't going to do a master's at all. And then, I got that COVID year of eligibility. So I got to do a master's. But the program I wanted to do, the clinical mental health counseling program, was 2 years long. So I said, you know what? I guess I'll just do communications. And I ended up loving it. I always liked the writing portion. I like speaking. So I really got to like tune into like that aspect of my talents. And I went into alumni relations at Lynn University. Obviously we were colleagues. And I absolutely loved what I did there. I got to give back to the school that I loved so much and give back to the students. A lot of them were my peers, my teammates. And that's when I really found out that alumni relations was something that I really enjoyed doing. And it's such a niche because no one really grows up thinking, I want to do alumni relations. Like, I didn't even know what it was. Nor did I ever think I was going to work in higher ed. So that was a really interesting space. I obviously worked at Lynn for about 8 months. And then I transitioned to life skills. And even though the title is pretty much the exact same, so I still do alumni relations, it couldn't be more different. I mean, even just what I do from the day-to-day tasks, I mean, I still utilize the same skills in terms of I still write a newsletter, right? And I still talk to people one-on-one, but I'm leading groups. I'm having, conversations about mental health all day long. And it's being able to build that rapport that's really the piece that I love the most about my job at Lynn. I'm now able to do that all day long at Life Skills.
That's the position you want to be in, is in a position like you mentioned very early on, combining your skills with things that you're interested in. So that's really cool. You mentioned something that I want to touch on for a second when you talked about, and I think this is a situation that I know we've talked about in the past, but so many people coming out of school, getting into their jobs, early, getting into leadership positions early on, it's something that you have to deal with. And you mentioned when you started at Lynn, you were a professional. Now on the other side, still a lot of your peers, a lot of your friends we're still in school. And so
Mhm.
what was that like for you? How did that kind of unfold? How did you, draw those lines in a balanced way to where it's like, you don't want to be arrogant and, pomp, like they're still your friends, but you still have to balance the professional side of it. So how do you go about that when you're in a role or in a position of that sort?
I think what was really helpful was that I started in June. So it was summertime, it was everyone went home. There weren't really that many people on campus. So I really got to get used to the position for a couple months before everyone came back. I think too, the fact that our office was kind of, even though it's in the main building, it's not in there. Like you have to specifically come to find us. And like, especially where my office was, like it wasn't just like there, right? You had to come like look for me. So I think that also helped. And I think I just, whether it was subconscious or intentional, I just, rather than looking at it as a barrier or, this weird kind of thing I had to navigate, I just saw it as an opportunity. So many people at Lynn already knew me as a peer, as Dani from the basketball team. I was involved in so many different things, whether that was, I was a wellness educator. I was in psych for my undergrad. There was so many different areas that I tapped into that a lot of people knew me. And it just meant, I think, we got to bring in a lot of students into the office that maybe wouldn't have come in before. And I know that historically, like the career center could seem kind of scary and like, you go in for your resumes. But I think, and especially you were a big part of that too, we became kind of those friendly faces, okay, it might seem daunting, but Ben and Dani. So even though to begin with, it was kind of difficult, it was my first full-time job, right? I'm having to figure out what to wear as a professional. But I think that when the school year really like came around, it just became, okay, how can I utilize that and make that benefit my position and the office as a whole?
Yeah, and that was obviously we talked about that at length, during both of our times, in the office was, how can we use our positions and what can easily be, looked at as a weakness or a downside of being, hey, you're young, you don't have experience, or they're going to look at you as a peer. You can look at that so easily as a negative, but we really did a lot of work in kind of trying to position this ourselves as it being a positive thing, like you're saying, related. And the reason why I bring that point up, and I'm glad that you kind of touched on it too, was because I think that so often when we're getting into our first jobs, when we're getting into these internships, whatever it is, you're like, I'm 20 years old, I'm 21, I'm 22, I'm 23, I just graduated, whatever. Like, what do I know? I don't have any answer. I can't contribute anything. And that's the furthest thing from the truth, because I shared it with the students, and it's something I believe in, and I try to practice too, is how you see the world is completely unique to you, and you may be able to fill in a gap that somebody else can or can't see, right? And so taking that mentality and applying it to what you do today with life skills, how have you brought how you kind of view things into this, I would say, your first job, your first full-time job in the mental health space, where you really want to be?
So it's so interesting that you mentioned that because I had never really felt inadequate when I worked at Lynn, because I
Hmm.
knew Lynn like the back of my hand. I knew the team knew me. I think honestly, it was the perfect situation for me to have my first full-time job. Coming to Life Skills was really the first time that I felt, okay, like I'm underqualified. It was that imposter syndrome kicking in. Especially because I found out that a lot of the clients assumed that I was late 20s, early 30s. I don't know how, but that's what they thought. So then when I would, say something that gave away my age, or I would say, yeah, I'm 24, it was like this complete change in how they perceive me. And they're like, this woman who's advising me is 24. So I'm sitting here and I'm saying, it's really important to find passion in your work and to find purpose. And I have to add to that, I know that I'm 24, so it might seem like the Gen Z thing to say, but I'm truly and genuinely happy. And, I think that, again, I'm trying to find ways where I can use that to my strengths and it be like, I just think that this generation focuses on more than just the 9 to 5. We really care about fulfillment. And I think that bringing that perspective can be life-changing for some of these older folks. I mean, we treat anyone that's 18 and up, and we are dual diagnosis. So that means we're dually licensed to either treat mental health or substance abuse or both. So really, we have people from all walks of life. So yes, at first it might be that kind of, who's this 24-year-old girl? Like, who is she to tell me anything? But I think very quickly we have that community where it's everyone's kind of perspective is valid, and everyone has something to contribute to the conversation, regardless of if you're 20, 40, never had a job, you're a CEO. I mean, we see everyone. So I think it's really, and my boss tells me this all the time, that the biggest obstacle that I have in my job is me. And he's always trying to get me out of my own head. But I think that that's something that a lot of people our age face. You know, it is that imposter syndrome. It is that, okay, so for example, for me, I'm the only person that works in alumni for my facility. Like, I have someone that I report to, but they oversee all the facilities. So I don't have a team necessarily. So it's me. Like, I run the alumni program. So it's, how do I navigate that? Considering I'm only 1 year out from college, I'm only 24. I mean, I'm not afraid to say I don't know the answer. When someone asks me something, I'm like, honestly, I don't know. Let's find someone who knows. And I think that that makes a big difference, rather than me just making up an answer, or like, I don't care that I come across as, oh, Dani doesn't know that. I don't want to pretend that I know everything. So I think it's also balancing like that honesty piece and just being really transparent. And, you know, I start off with I know I'm 24, but this is kind of how I view life, and this is where it's led me.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the things that, I think that, throughout your time that you feel like you've picked up from somebody older than you or maybe younger than you, whether it's in this stuff or out, just getting at the idea of picking stuff up from people who have different perspectives or different thoughts than you. Has there been something, since your time in life skills that you're like, hey, that's somebody with a totally different perspective, but the way they see that has helped me in some way?
I was trying to think of this quote that a client shared with me 2 weeks ago. I was doing a group on finding purpose in your career. And, this is someone who, works in finance. And I was asking, like, are you satisfied? And they were like, I mean, I make good money. I said, that's not what I asked. I asked whether you enjoy what you do. And they're like, well, I mean, obviously there's parts I don't like I don't love my job. And we were going back and forth. Their perspective was literally, it doesn't matter whether I love it or not. Like, I have different priorities. I mean, they're in their 40s, that they're more established, I'm over here 24, like, I don't have to worry about anything other than me and my cat. You know what I mean? So it's, our priorities are different. But, and I wanted to quote it specifically, but I forget what it was. But the overall thing was, just do what you're good at. And if you do that enough times, you'll become the best at what you do. And the best at anything always gets paid. So it was like, even though for me, money isn't in kind of like my equation, it was such like an interesting way of looking at it. Like, if you just do what you're good at, it will ultimately lead to you getting paid, because the best at anything gets paid. So even though we started at two different points, we kind of ended up at the same thing, like combining what you're good at to what you can actually make money out of.
Right. And so wanting to perform well and wanting to be, the best and stuff. Now, this is something that I was thinking about the other day. Is how do you balance, and we're talking financially here, talking about money, right? We're not gonna get into personal details, don't worry. I know people at home are checking their pulse saying, where's Ben going with this? So we're not going there, right? But I think that, I know I'm this way, is because the things that I do and the things that I'm so incredibly fortunate enough to get paid to do are really fun for me. I enjoy them. I'm passionate about them. They bring me a lot of fulfillment, like things we're talking about. And I think I also, to some extent, want that to always be at the forefront. And I'm almost kind of nervous that making a lot of money will take away that, like, joy in a sense. And so I guess what I'm getting at is, I think money doesn't have to necessarily be an evil thing. Like, you can be really good at something, you get paid a lot, and that doesn't make you a bad person. And so how do you kind of view and unpack that, of going off of the quote that you said, of saying, hey, I'm really, really good at what I do. I also, as a result, make a lot of money. And how do you interpret that and see that being not a bad thing? Because it's not, but it's a thought that I have. And I'm just curious what you think.
It's so interesting, because I think for me, when it becomes an issue is, and we've had this dialogue, because obviously when we spoke about, what people don't really know when they have their first job, is they're going to hire you and pay you whatever you're willing to accept. So for me right now, I'm getting paid to do what I would honestly do for free. So for me, like, whatever number, I'm like, sure, I would have done it for free. But if I was to find out that my coworker that does the exact same thing is getting paid 20,000 more, I'd probably start thinking about money and be like, dang, I could be making that. Even though I was satisfied with whatever amount I'm making, knowing that I could have made more would probably make me start thinking about money. But I think that at the end of the day, and this is how I like look at money, and I have this really like warped kind of like way of looking at money. But it's like, what do I think it's worth? And am I making that much? So kind of going into it, doing my research, how much should this position be making, or what do I think? Obviously, I'm not going in there saying, yeah, I want to make $1 million. Like, no, I'm being realistic, right? But anything that I'm offered more than that is a win.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how I look at it. Again, when I think like, okay, let's just say I was making like $1 million right now, like what would I do with that? I don't need that. Like I live comfortably. I have, you know, been in so many different times of my life. I've been at such low lows that honestly, me just having peace right now, and that to me is worth more than anything. Like fulfillment in my career, coming home and, you know, having a stable home, a peaceful life, that to me is way more valuable than, you know, the dollar signs. So I guess I was just talking about this today with a client. You know, everyone has different priorities, different goals. Again, this might change, you know, once I have a partner, once I'm trying to buy a house, you know, I might start being more money oriented. But in the meantime, the only thing that leads me is kind of my passion. And for me, that's helping people.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that really is the key there is as your priorities change, where your priorities may require more money, that's not a bad thing to want more money. And I think that's kind of what I was getting at. And that's a process that I'm working through myself. And that's why I asked that. And I think what you also said too is such a great point of it was such a good point. Like I can't even get it out of my
Such
head
a
right now.
good one
It
that you
was so
can't even
it was
remember
so
it.
good. No. But you talked about how you just want to get whatever you believe that it's worth, right? And that makes you happy. And I think that's a perfectly good way. And you mentioned you feeling it's a warped way. I don't think that's warped at all, because you're going into it saying, hey, this is what I would be satisfied with. And to your point, anything above that, yeah, bring it on. Sure, you're not going
Right,
to
I'll
turn it
take
away. But
it.
yeah. But I think that's a really good approach to it, of saying, hey, find a number that I'm comfortable with, something that I can live with, something that meets my needs. And as those needs change, you cross that bridge when you get there. And so, see, I told you it's such a good point. I just wanted to really draw it out, really.
I was gonna piggyback off of that. I just thought about something. So at work, so we have different facilities within our parent company, and we have an alumni coordinator at each facility across America. And we have these alumni coordinator games which our national director like puts on, and like for everything that you do, whether that's an alumni readmission, getting a Google review, getting a testimonial, there's each like points. It's a point system. Now you could technically like count your points as you go along. I don't. I just do my job, and then at the end of the month I get told how many points I have, and I'm like, okay, cool. But there's a cash incentive, like there's a cash prize attached to it. So I'm just doing my job, you know, me being the competitor that I am, I would love to come out on top. So, you know, I'm working super hard. But then if I'm told I get an extra $100, like awesome, like I'm gonna take it, but that's not what's really driving me. You know what I mean? So I think that it's perfectly normal. In fact, like you need to think about money. Like money makes the world go round. Like I'm not gonna say that that's not the case, but being aware of it and knowing your worth and knowing what you need to make in order to live comfortably is one thing, but for me that's just not what drives me, and I think that's the main difference, and that's why I'm satisfied where I'm at, because I have that balance.
Mm-hmm. And I think what you touched on there too was something that's a cliche, but cliches are cliches because they said a lot, and because oftentimes they're true, and especially coming from the basketball world, the process, you say, hey, you could get rewarded for this, but how I approach it is doing my job to the very best of my ability. And I think that's a really big thing of when you're pursuing whatever your goals are. A lot of it can be out of your control, but it's like, hey, if I do what I'm supposed to do, and that even goes back to the quote that your client was sharing with you was, hey, if you do something you're good at and you do it over and over and over again, good things will happen. So if you stick with the process and do what you're supposed to do over and over and over again, good things will happen. And so that's really, really cool. And going off of that too, I always like drawing back. We love sports. We love talking sports here, right? And under that umbrella of the process and learning from different industries, which is one of my favorite things to talk about, how have some things that you learned from your time playing basketball relate to impact the work that you do today? And I'm going to challenge you here, okay? because we have these conversations a lot. I don't want stuff we've talked about yet, but I want you to think of something that like maybe not be so obvious in terms of like hard work or team camaraderie, even though
Okay,
those are real.
I wasn't gonna say that anymore.
I know you weren't, but like those are real, and so I'm not hating on those, but I know you got some gems in you, and I wanna pull those out.
The first thing that I thought about, which I don't think really answers the question, but just the fact that I played sports has been a conversation starter for a lot of the rapport that I've built with the clients. So what me and you would talk about a lot is I played basketball, but I'm not a basketball player, right? So I'm able to share with them, hey, I played basketball in college. You can hear my cat right now. That's just Biscuit, guys. She wants to say hi.
Biscuit being biscuit.
Biscuit things. But it's, I played basketball, and they'd say, oh, I'm a big basketball fan. So the thing that not only kind of led to my education, that led to the job that I have, it's also something that I can talk about. And it's honestly, I'd say that's one of my biggest strengths, is being able to find a commonality with each one of my clients. Like a client will come in, I'm like, oh, shoot, how am I going to find something to talk about? Like they're 70, like we just have nothing in common. This happened not even all that long ago, and they were a basketball referee earlier on in their life. You know what I mean? So it's just finding those commonalities. A lot of times, like, they're not surface level, and I have to go digging a little bit. But when it comes out, I'm like, okay, I got them. Like, I know that we have that rapport now, and they trust me. And that's ultimately my number one kind of goal in my position, is to build trust and to make them feel comfortable. So that's like the first thing that I thought of when you're asking, like, how does my background in sports kind of affect my job now in mental health? I would say that, as well as me having the understanding of what it means to face a stigma against mental illness. So when I have clients telling me about, oh, well, I don't feel like I can open up to my partner about it, I'm like, hey, I get it. I played a sport where, it was kind of frowned upon to be vulnerable and to, talk about your mental health. So I think that element too is I'm able to tell them, I get it. And I think just having that commonality again, like coming back to that common ground, that really helps me in my job.
Definitely. And that's the other thing that we talk about a lot. This episode really is just a summary of our conversations that we've had present and past. But they're good conversations. And that's one of the things that we talk about, is using your experiences, whether that's basketball, whether that's, business, whether that's whatever it is, clubs, organizations, as a vehicle to get other messages across, and that's I think. Oh no, we're still good. I'm trying a new camera setup here, right? This is live TV, and I thought there was a little hiccup, but we're
I
rocking
saw it
and
too. I
rolling.
was like, uh-oh.
Yeah. So but yeah, so using your experiences as a vehicle to get other lessons or other ideas across. And I remember we had a phone call. I think it might have been one of the first times you sat down with to lead a group session, and you were cool, calm, and collected, of course, as always. Talking about what to talk about. So one, I want to kind of hear about how that session went, and then two, what is your approach now to leading the group sessions, and as you mentioned, the necessity to build trust. How do you go about doing that?
So the phone call that Ben here is referring to, I was told the morning of, hey, in 2 hours you're gonna be running a group. I was like, I don't even know what to talk about. And we ended up talking about it, and I was going to talk about how, running a marathon and the whole preparation for it and the training portion kind of relates to life. And, I went in with my whole kind of spiel, like I had a script kind of like of things like I'd highlighted, and I just put up on the board, well, how many miles is it?
26.2.
I'd written that down on the board. And I'm like, does anyone know what this number represents? And like 5 of them were like, yeah, like a marathon. I was like, what? What do you mean? And then someone's like, oh yeah, like I ran like 5 marathons. I'm like, what? So then I'm able to just use him as kind of like, how did you train? How was this? How was the run? And everything that I planned for kind of went out the window. And, that was really nice that was my first session, because I was like it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. And like, I was so anxious and so worried when realistically they didn't have any expectations for me. Like I had set them all for myself. And since then, I mean, I do prep for each group that I run. I run groups on Fridays. And I know that some of the therapists will make fun of me, like, why are you prepping so hard? I'm like, I just want to be prepared, just so I can go in there and feel confident. Sometimes I don't even look at the material that I prepped, but it's just, it helps me be more calm and more poised. But the way that I really run those groups is I make them very conversational. I make them discussion based. I tell them, you know, I'm not a therapist. I'm not going to pretend that I am. I'm not going to stand up here and lecture you guys. I'll have prompts. I'll have, you know, things to get them thinking. Sometimes I'll have some activities, maybe some games, but I really talk about all types of things that relate to recovery. So whether that's aftercare, whether that talks about life after treatment, whether that's building a sober community and how to find meaningful relationships, I'm able to draw from so many different elements, which honestly, I really thank the wellness program for that, because that's when I really learned about all the dimensions of wellness. So now I'm kind of like in my head, like, okay, we spoke about careers last week. Tomorrow, I'm probably going to talk about this, you know what I mean? So that's really helped me. But again, I kind of wanted to touch on what you said about the experiences, right? Because everything that I've been through kind of has led me to this point. And whenever a client shares, you know, some trauma that they've been through, or they share something with me, and, you know, I'm able to tell them, you know, first of all, I'm very glad that on so many levels, I'm able to tell them, hey, I went through something similar. I think that sets the stage very early on for that trust. They know that I'm not just some random person that like studied the stuff but didn't live it, right? I'm able to be like, hey, I went through something very similar. And that is where like I see that shift in that trust, and they're like, oh, okay, she knows what she's talking about. And, you know, I'm able to tell them that even though we don't deserve the terrible things that happen to us, because that's realistically what I'm talking about every day with my clients, is there's a lot of trauma. Even though we don't deserve those traumatic events, I am where I am now, and I'm so happy now that maybe if those events hadn't have happened, I wouldn't be where I am now. So how can I wish for anything different? So when we're talking about how all these experiences have like helped us get to where we are, and how we can draw in them for, you know, teaching the principles and the conversations and our perspective on, you know, the world, how can I change anything in my past if I'm really happy now with where I am? And like that has brought me so much peace, because it's, you know, obviously there were terrible things in my past or things that I wish had gone differently. But again, I love where I'm at now, so I wouldn't change a thing, you know, and that's really one of the biggest things I try and share with the clients.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think really so much of what that is too is like, you never ever want anything bad to happen to you. You don't want to go through tough time. No one wants to go through any level of tough time, you know, but to be able to, and I love that. It makes my heart sing, makes me happy, you know, that you have that perspective. Cause I know that that takes a lot of work, no matter who you are, to have that perspective and be able to see, hey, you know, what I went through, whatever it was, has led me here, and there's meaning in that. And when you find value in the good times as well as the bad times, then it gives value. When you see it has meaning, it gives value to it. And I think that's such an important thing, again, wherever you're coming from and wherever you're going.
Right. And I mean, like, I could even apply that just looking at basketball, right? If we don't want to make it all like tough and heavy stuff, but like, did I want to transfer after my freshman year? No. I would have loved to do all 4 years at Vermont, but that's not what happened.
Mhm.
I came to Lynn, ended up staying there, had a great basketball career, you know, ended up getting a job there, and that's now me living and working full time in Florida. So where would I be now if I was still in Vermont? I
Mhm.
mean, I'd probably be fine, but I
Mhm.
wouldn't be where I am right now. So how could I wish for anything different? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's the same thing as like I try to believe that, you know, regardless of whatever route and path, you know, I would make the most of, you know, however things would unfold. But same idea, something we've talked about before too. Obviously the goal was to play professional baseball. That was it. And you want to get there. And being done after college is, I think about that from time to time, is like, you know, if I was still playing, I'd be still playing, and maybe you're not, maybe not, you know, I'd be doing things like this, or I would be able to talk to different groups or have the experiences, you know, it could have been the same. It could have not. And like I said, I like to think that, you know, wherever I was, I'd make the most of it. But to be able to be really grateful for where you are now is beyond an important thing. It really, really is. And
I think
go
that
ahead. Yeah,
there
go ahead.
is
Go
a
ahead.
difference though between, I'm not someone that tries to find the silver lining in things. And you know this. I'm not an
Right.
optimist, like I'm really not. So it's not about, oh, like, you know, something bad happens, oh, it's fine. Like this is a lesson learned. Like, no, like I'm
Mhm,
definitely not
mhm.
like that, but it's not in the moment. Like in the moment, I still go through it,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's kind of, you know, I've gone through the emotions. Okay, that's happened. What was the lesson in that? And
Mm,
I will find a lesson in that. Even if there's no lesson there, I'm gonna make it a lesson. And I truly, that's how I see everything right now, whether that's I made a mistake at work. Okay, I'm going to be embarrassed. I'm going to feel bad or whatever. But first of all, I have a team around me and leadership that wants me to fall forwards. So they
mm,
want me to try and to be innovative. And if it doesn't work out, okay, we'll just regroup. But, even just my personal life, friends that I've fallen out with, or people, relationships that I thought were going to be in my life for a long time and then not anymore. Okay, I'm able to put them in a box, put it on a shelf. I'm like, that's okay. That happened. What did I learn from it? It doesn't all have to be like bad blood or anything. And I think that's just growth and that's maturity. And, I think I'm finally kind of like understanding what that means.
mm. This is why I love this conversation that we're having here too, is because we talk about so much, and I think we see a lot of the world and experiences in very similar ways. But like you said, you probably lean not so much to the optimism scale, and I probably lean a little bit more to the optimism scale. Right? We're on different ends of the spectrum,
We're on
but I
the
think
same spectrum.
right,
But
yeah, different ends, right? But we do ultimately get to the same point, because the things, the troubling times, the hard times that I go through, I try to, extract lessons from too. And one thing that, for our optimists out there, this goes out to you, is I think is critical. And one thing that I would say recently trying to practice much more, is allowing myself to feel the emotions, right? And allowing myself to say, like, that sucked, right? I hated that, it wasn't good. I'm sad. I don't feel, I'm angry. That upset me. That hurt me, right? Because for so long, I always felt like anything that was not 110% positive, not only was it negative, but it was also bad, right? And I think that prolonged difficult parts of my life, like difficult moments, was I wouldn't allow myself to admit, no, that hurt, that sucked, i'm
well, and
not i'm not
here's
as
a
happy.
secret that I'll tell you. All emotions are good emotions. Like when you're angry, we're like we're taught that any emotion that we feel that's not like happiness or like joy, it's
Hmm.
like, no, get over it like as soon as possible, right? Like, but we're supposed to feel those
Hmm.
emotions. That's why we have emotions. And like that's what I tell my clients every day. I'm like, I'm angry, I'm just gonna like forget about it. No, why are you angry?
Hmm.
Let's talk about it. Let's there's a reason. You don't feel things just
Yeah.
because for the health of it. You know what I mean? Like just for my health. Like no, it's and like understanding it and really sitting in it and sitting in that discomfort. I mean, obviously that's stuff that I've learned through therapy. If you don't go to therapy, like you should. That's my plug as someone who works in the field. I think everyone should go to therapy. But these are conversations that I have with my clients every day. Like, understanding your emotions. And then also like we have like an emotion wheel. So it's
Hmm.
not just happiness, like anger, like even within that anger, is it frustration? Is it rage? Is it betrayal? Like, and these are things that a lot of times, first of all, like we don't identify, and second of all, we don't know how to verbalize, right? So I'm glad, even for you, like, that you're saying that you're finally like doing that for yourself. Like I'm really glad to hear that.
Oh, thanks, me
Of
too.
course.
And that was something that, because I've been venturing out east into the Eastern world, and that's kind of how I came across some of these philosophies too. I love, pulling from, different areas and different, walks and outlooks of life. And one of the things that, Thich Nhat Hanh, a Buddhist monk, he talked about, an example that he gave, I guess is a better way to put it, is that, when you have a stomach ache, or a headache, you take care of it. That's the verbiage that's used. Oh, I don't feel well, I'll take care of it, right? But I know this better than anybody. You're not feeling well up top, you don't take care of it, you push it away, you ignore it, right? And that was a concept that I always get, especially on the mental health side, and taking care of your well-being, is like, yeah, you should treat it like they say, treat it the same as a broken arm and all these things. But it's real. And I think, for me at least, what Thich Nhat Hanh talked about in when that example of, when you have a stomach ache, you take care of it. When a baby's crying, you take care of it, right? So why, when we're hurt or we're not feeling good, upstairs, why don't you take care of it? So now when you're angry, and that's the approach that I talk about. Now when I'm angry, oh, I'm frustrated, like you're saying, it's not go away. It's okay, well, wait a second. Why am I feeling like this?
Mhm.
Okay,
That's
let
a
me take
game
care of it.
changer when you start asking
Yeah.
why. I have
Yeah.
some people in my life will be like, don't try and like therapize me right now. I'm like, no, I'm really not. But it's just when you say certain things like, oh, I don't like that. Why?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I never thought about that. That's how like my inner dialogue, like maybe not in the moment. Like again, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that I'm like above everything else, but maybe when I've calmed down a little bit, I'll sit and think and I'll reflect and I'm like, why did that make me so angry? What
Yeah.
was that? And I'm really fortunate enough to, now that I live with Hattie, Lynn alum, we are able to like break stuff down, like, on our couch. I'll be like, this just happened and this made me so angry, and I think this is why. And like being able to have that dialogue, because I have that with my therapist, but that's different. That's like in a clinical setting. I can
Mhm.
have it at work, but again, that's a bit different. So having that kind of on all those levels, I'm able to speak to coworkers who are, trained and licensed, and they're able to give me feedback. Like I'm able to get that kind of feedback and response, and it really helps me break stuff down that happens in my life.
Yeah. No, definitely. This is it's good stuff.
It is
Um,
good stuff. I love it.
so this kind of I wrote this down because I didn't want to forget it, like that really, really important thing you touched on that I definitely didn't forget. But this one, I definitely don't want to forget. So as someone that works in the space that you work in, I think this is a really valuable question, because you mentioned, this is when it popped up in my head, was when you talked about how you create that the connection, the feeling of safetyness, for lack of a better term, with your clients, say, hey, I went through what I went through, I can relate, I can connect. What do you share with people who may or may not have gone through similar things but want to provide support for somebody who is going through something? And because you don't want to say like, I get it, and they may not get it, and maybe that you say that because that's, you want to help. So what does somebody in a position who doesn't get it or may not get it, can't relate, say to still be supportive and still help?
So I have to say that a lot in my job, because even though I've been through a lot, I haven't been through everything, right? And
Right.
with us being dually licensed, I substance abuse is not something that I've struggled with. So whenever that comes up, I have to say, I can't say that I can't say that I relate, but I can see that that would be really hard for you. So I'm
Mm,
always trying to validate,
mm,
even if I haven't experienced it. So I also learned the difference between sympathy and empathy. I'm pretty sure, don't quote me, if I'm saying I empathize, that's because I've been through that. Whereas sympathy and like sympathize is like, I haven't been through it, but like my heart goes out to you. Maybe I got them switched up, but anyways. At work, I'm very conscious and intentional about the words that I use,
mm,
because I don't ever want to give that kind of feeling of, like you said, like, I get it. Well, no, you don't.
mm,
And I want them to know like that experience is theirs alone. And I won't always share with my clients, it's if I think we have that rapport, if I think, a lot of times, because we do have a lot of younger adults, so a lot of times I kind of like, it's like a reflection of myself with my clients, and I'm like, I was right where you are right now, like, and I just tell them that, and I always try and lead with, what do I wish I was told when I was struggling? But for the things that I can't relate to, I'm so transparent. I say, I don't know how you're feeling right now. Thank you for opening up to me. Thank you for trusting me, and for being brave enough to be vulnerable right now. I can imagine that's really hard for you. I can imagine that's really frustrating, and, everything that you're feeling right now is valid. These are the words and like the verbiage that I use on a day-to-day basis. And I mean, I think it's worked so far.
mm,
I think sometimes too, like, you can also ask, how can I help you?
mm,
What do you need? Right? I was just having this conversation yesterday with one of the families that I work with, because I also run family groups, and they were saying that what they're working on right now is, when someone's venting to me, I'm not gonna just give them solutions, like unsolicited like suggestions. Like, no, I'm gonna just listen and just be a good listener. And I'm a fixer, so that was
mm,
something I had to work on too. Is, well, have you tried this? And they didn't ask for that.
mm,
So I think too, it sounds kind of awkward and like weird to say, but what do you need from me? Do you want suggestions? Do you just want me to listen?
mm.
A lot of times people just want someone to listen to them. So I'd say those are kind of like some of the suggestions that I'd say, if maybe you haven't been through those similar types of things, but you still want to be an ally and still want to support. I'd say that's probably a good place to start.
Mhm. With the work that you do, I imagine there's times or days that are tougher emotionally, with some of the things you're discussing with clients and handling, than others. And so how do you personally go about taking care of yourself so the stuff doesn't weigh on you so heavy? Because I know you personally too are somebody that really internalizes a lot of things. I think that's what makes you good at your job, is because you care so much, and I think everybody in the space that you work in cares a whole ton too. And that's a beautiful thing. And so as somebody who cares so much and works in this space, how do you take care of yourself, when things get a little heavy emotionally?
I'd say I've built really strong relationships with some of my coworkers. So I'm literally able to just like walk into the office and be like, this just happened. And like we get to break stuff down. Because it's only like my 5th month working in the field, like there are still some things that catch me off guard. And like I'm like, this just happened. And they're like, yeah, we see that all the time. It's just your first time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And they're all able to be like, I remember the first time I was in that position. So it helps me being able, like with me being the newest person on the team, to just have people to turn to. And they're all like in their late 20s, and they're people like, especially like one of them, like I speak to her all the time about this kind of stuff, and we have very similar mentalities and approaches. So again, like it really helps to have those people to turn to. In terms of like my own self-care, it's funny because I feel like I get free therapy from my job. Like I'll be telling people like, hey, make sure you take time this week to practice one thing of self-care. And I catch myself, I'm like, I didn't even do that myself. And I kind of hold myself to a higher standard now, because if I'm going to tell someone to do something, I need to be doing that myself. So it's kind of in like this weird way, I kind of look at it, what would I be telling my clients to do right now?
Mm.
If a client came to me and said they're working like 60-hour weeks, what would I say to them? Hey, take it easy. So I need to follow that same advice that I'm giving them. I also am aware that with it being still so early on in my career in mental health, I haven't burnt out yet, but it is a field that a lot of people burn out in. And, my coworkers have told me that I give a lot and I might have to start pulling back. But I'm kind of gonna keep doing what I'm doing until I feel it kind of like wearing on me.
Mm.
I'm not like, and this, I'm not the type of person that's gonna give like any less than my full wholehearted effort. So that too, I get to come home and like just be, even in like amidst like my own hardships, I still feel worthy because of my purpose. I'm still helping people. So my own self-care is also just pouring everything into my job. So
Mm. And you come home to your daughter, little furry friend, give her a couple
she misses
scruffs.
me right now.
Yeah, yeah. So that's really, really good stuff. Really good stuff. Now, just touching on some career advice. When somebody goes and sits down for an interview, they get called into an interview and somebody else offers them a snack prior to walking and sitting down for the interview. Do you take that snack? Is that a good thing to do, or is that a bad thing to do? Like if you're hungry, should you take the snack right before you walk in the
No
interview?
matter what you do, decline the snack. It is a trick. It is a setup. Do not take a snack before you go into the interview.
There you go. You're there first. And
You
so
heard it here first,
right,
folks.
right. So now you're gonna have people going in their interviews hungry all the time because of what you said there. But this was
Or just prepare better and just have a meal like a couple hours before.
That's it. That's a better preparation. And this was in reference to when Dani interviewed in the office at the Career Center. She walked in, and my hospitality. This is just warm
Hey,
hospitality,
yeah, a 10 for the hospitality.
Right, exactly. I take pride in my snack game. I offered her a bag of popcorners, right? Kettle corn,
Yep.
personal favorite of mine, right? Fan favorite, I think, across the globe. And and she took them. And apparently it's bad form to eat, before your interview or as you're walking into it. But
With an
it's
open bag of chips just into the interview.
right, sure. But we learn from it, right? We talk about our experiences and we learn from it. So
Haven't done this.
this is career cash, and I thought we'd talk a little bit about career there for a second. But kind of looking forward, I know you mentioned you're really, really happy where you are right now, and I love that. And we could almost leave it there. But where are you looking towards? Because I know you are also very goal oriented too, so yeah, I'd imagine it be in this space. Correct me if I'm wrong. What are you building towards? What do where are you hoping to grow into in the coming years, decades, millennia?
So that's a tricky question for me because I'm not American.
Mm,
So it's really hard for me to think long term.
mm.
So my current visa, so it got extended, so I'm good to go until May 2025, right? So for me, like, oh, did we lose you?
No, I'm still here. I'm still here. We might just got to switch the camera.
All good technical issues, just do that little screen,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Um,
And we're back. Yep.
but for me, like I can't just think, okay, where do I want to be in 10 years? Like that can just change like this for me. So at least now I know for the next 2 years, like that's probably the most stability I've had like in a really long time is a 2-year plan.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't envision leaving my company. Like I love what I do, and specifically with the company that I have, I love the team, I love the clients. I can't imagine leaving. In terms of what I see for myself, I think this has helped me. Like, I know for a fact I don't want to be a therapist. Like, I don't want to go back to school. I don't want to be a counselor. That's just not what I want to do. Um, I wanted to initially, when I was, a couple years ago during the pandemic, I wanted to go specifically into like sports psychology, and kind of really working on breaking that stigma within, athletics. Now, I don't know, because I'm so much more than just an athlete, Now I'm just like seeing it way beyond just that as like the demographic that like I care the most about. I would say like specifically like what really ignites my passion is especially women that have been in abusive situations that are, healing from trauma, specifically like sexual trauma really. And long term, like a dream, a goal of mine is to be working kind of like in legislation and to be in those rooms where they get to talk about what type of protections we can put in place for women that are victims. Like, for example, some of the policies that they have at work, some of the benefits, some of the PTO that they get when they are facing domestic violence. I mean, these are things that happen. And when it happens, you don't really know what to do. And so if I could even be in those kind of conversations, I mean, that would be a dream come true. But that's like long, long term. But again, whether that's here in America or in England, who knows? Take it one day at a time.
Amen. Amen, sister. And this is what I love about doing this show is because we talk, I'd say, on a fairly regular basis. We have these conversations off the air as well.
Yeah.
And I'm learning something new. Didn't know you wanted to get into legislation. I think that's awesome. And I know that if someone's making a change, you're the gal to do it.
Well,
So
that's the thing is I just think, and like in the most humble way possible, I really recognize my intersectionality. So it's with being a Hispanic woman who is an immigrant, who is bisexual, who speaks Spanish. Like there are just so many things that I can encompass that I just think I can speak for so many different groups and I can represent so many different groups and so many minorities that I just think it would be a waste not to put that to good use, Again, combining what you're good at with your passions. I think I'm really good at speaking to people and building rapport and being relatable. And I think like I really want to be a voice for people that feel like they don't have a voice. So if I can do that in the future, that's kind of the dream. But for right now, I mean, I'm pretty much like living the dream right now, like doing what I always wanted to do in a position I didn't even know existed. So I'm being very fortunate.
yeah, no, I'd say you're doing that great work now too. So that's awesome. So as we come to the end, it is that time. Big drum roll, please. Where we are, I know, sad tears, but it is time for us to cash out. Where you leave us with your biggest tip, your most important tip, biggest lesson learned to give us a little extra money for the road. What do you have for us today?
Oh, this is so tough because I was thinking about this earlier, and there's just so many things that I could say. And I didn't want to.
She actually was thinking about it earlier. She's texting me like 3 hours ago saying, "Oh, I'm thinking about my cashing out."
I
So
was.
yeah,
I
I
even
know,
asked my coworker.
I'm standing up for you, making sure that people know this is real.
You're validating this.
Yeah.
Because I feel like on the one hand, I could say something about, when one door closes, another one opens, right? I was heartbroken when I left Lynn, but it led me to a job that I'm even better at, that I love even more. So it's, again, tapping into that kind of, how can I hate anything that happened when this is where it's led me, right? So there's that. Then there's also just kind of, I don't know if you've ever heard like grow through what you go through.
Mhm.
So it's like all that, like the bad stuff, all like the pain, like the suffering, the frustrations, the obstacles, like using that to channel you and drive you. And, I mean, it sounds so cliche and I hate being cliche, but it makes you stronger. Like, I would say I'm a very strong woman today. I don't think I would be as strong had I not gone through and overcome all the things that I had in my way, over the years. So there's not a quote in there, but I feel like it's a
Yeah,
package
yeah.
kind of like, but the main thing is, everything happens for a reason. That's like one of my favorite quotes. Everything happens for a reason. When one door closes, another one opens, and grow through what you go through. And kind of rather than seeing it as woe is me and I got dealt a crappy pack of cards, it's I still made something happen even though I had a bad deck of cards. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And like there's just so much more satisfaction for me knowing that I'm where I am now, despite the odds like not being in my favor,
Absolutely. And that's what we call a value pack, right? That was not one, not two, but three.
And
You
for
might have
your
had,
buck,
you might,
I love a good deal.
right? That you might have had 4 or 5 cashing
This
outs there,
thrifted.
right? Again, for
That
those
should have been my cashing out. That should have been my cashing out.
just talking about finding good work clothes at a discount price. Yeah, for those of you who are just listening in, the blouse she's got on thrifted, fire fit, by the way. But what else do we expect? So yeah, leave it to you, Dani, to leave us with the value pack for cashing out. The whole episode was valuable. I can't thank you enough. And you know me, I'm always in your corner, always got you. I'm excited to see where you go next. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.